For decades, Brad Pitt has been one of Hollywood's most admired, desired, and mysterious figures. The world has followed every chapter of his love life, from his fairy tale marriage to Jennifer Aniston, to his whirlwind romance and high-profile split from Angelina Jolie. But beneath the red carpets, paparazzi flashbulbs, and endless tabloid headlines, there's always been one unanswered question. Who was Brad Pitt's true love? For years, fans speculated, insiders whispered, and rumors swirled. Some said it was Jennifer, the one who got away. Others claimed it was Angelina, the woman who changed him forever. But recently, in a rare and emotional moment, Brad finally broke his silence, revealing the truth about the one woman who, in his own words, knew me better than I knew myself. His confession stunned fans, not because of who he named, but why he said it. It wasn't about fame, beauty, or success. It was about connection, timing, and the heartbreaking realization that sometimes the right person comes into your life at the wrong time. As he reflected on his decades in Hollywood, his rise and fall, and the relationships that shaped him, Brad spoke candidly for the first time about what real love truly means and how he let it slip away. What he revealed left the world speechless and proved that even the biggest movie stars carry regrets that never fade. In the late 1990s, when Hollywood was at its most glamorous, Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston were its golden couple, beautiful, talented, and seemingly perfect together. It was a love story that seemed straight out of a movie, two of the world's most famous stars finding each other amid the chaos of fame. They met in 1998, introduced by their managers, a simple blind date that would change both of their lives forever. Jennifer was America's sweetheart, fresh off her success as Rachel Green on Friends. Brad was the silver screen heartthrob, adored for his roles in Legends of the Fall, Fight Club, and Seven. When they appeared together for the first time, the cameras couldn't get enough. The chemistry was undeniable. The world was witnessing a fairy tale come to life. In 2000, their wedding in Malibu became the stuff of Hollywood legend. Overlooking the ocean, surrounded by flowers, fireworks, and a star-studded guest list, Brad and Jennifer said, "I do." For fans, they were more than just a couple. They were a symbol of hope that real love could survive the glare of celebrity. But behind the perfect smiles and magazine covers, the cracks were already beginning to form. Both were at the peak of their careers, constantly pulled in different directions. While Jennifer was shooting Friends, Brad was filming on location for months at a time. "We didn't see each other much," Jennifer later admitted. "We were two people running parallel lives." Still, their love seemed genuine. They often spoke of starting a family, of slowing down and focusing on each other. But Hollywood doesn't slow down for anyone. In 2004, everything changed. Brad began filming Mr. and Mrs. Smith alongside Angelina Jolie, a woman whose intensity and energy instantly captivated him. The chemistry between them was undeniable, on screen and off. Though Brad and Jennifer denied any trouble at first, the world could feel a storm brewing. By early 2005, they announced their separation. The statement was polite, even tender. But for fans, it felt like the end of an era. The perfect couple had fallen apart, and the public heartbreak that followed became one of the most talked-about moments in pop culture history. Jennifer's tears became tabloid headlines. Brad's silence became fuel for speculation. And as his relationship with Angelina grew, the narrative was set. Jennifer was the heartbroken ex, and Brad was the man who had moved on too quickly. Yet over the years, something quietly changed. While Brad and Angelina's relationship burned bright and then publicly imploded, Jennifer remained graceful and strong. Time softened the pain, and both began to look back with a new kind of honesty. In later interviews, Brad spoke fondly of his years with Jennifer. "I was young," he admitted. "I didn't realize what I had." She was kind, loving, and genuine. There was real love there. Those words, simple yet powerful, reignited hope among fans that perhaps his heart had never truly let her go. For Jennifer, there was never bitterness, only understanding. "We had something beautiful," she said. "It just wasn't meant to last forever." But as the years passed, as Brad faced his own personal battles, divorce, addiction, self-reflection, the memory of that simpler love lingered. Those who knew him well said that Jennifer represented something rare to him, peace. She reminded him of a time before chaos, before fame turned heavy and life became complicated. And now, decades later, when asked about his true love, Brad's answer has left fans stunned because it brought the story full circle. He didn't speak with regret, but with gratitude. He spoke of the woman who, even after everything, still made him smile. And as we move into the next part of this story, one truth becomes clear. Some love stories never really end. They just live quietly in the heart, waiting to be remembered. When Brad Pitt met Angelina Jolie on the set of Mr. and Mrs. Smith in 2004, it wasn't just the beginning of a movie. It was the beginning of one of Hollywood's most talked-about love affairs. On screen, their chemistry was explosive. Off-screen, it was undeniable. At the time, Brad was still married to Jennifer Aniston, and Angelina had a reputation for being bold, unpredictable, and utterly magnetic. She was the opposite of everything Brad had known. Wild where Jennifer was calm, spontaneous where Jennifer was steady. And for a man who had spent years living under the image of the perfect Hollywood husband, Angelina represented freedom, a chance to rediscover himself. After Mr. and Mrs. Smith wrapped, rumors began swirling that their connection had gone beyond acting. Both denied it at first, but when Brad and Jennifer announced their separation soon after, the public made its own conclusions. Within months, Brad was seen vacationing with Angelina and her young son, Maddox. By 2006, they confirmed they were together and expecting a child. It was the beginning of a new chapter for Brad, one filled with adventure, purpose, and passion. Together, he and Angelina became a global power couple. They adopted children from Cambodia, Ethiopia, and Vietnam, and later welcomed biological children of their own. They spoke about humanitarian work, visited refugee camps, and seemed to redefine what celebrity could mean. To the outside world, they were perfect. Brangelina, the beautiful duo saving the world while raising a family. But behind the camera flashes, their relationship was far more complicated. Angelina was strong-willed, driven, and fiercely protective of her family. Brad, meanwhile, was struggling to find balance between career, fatherhood, and personal peace. There was love, but there was also chaos, one insider later said. They burned bright, maybe too bright. The intensity that drew them together soon became the same force that tore them apart. Arguments, differences in parenting styles, and Brad's growing struggle with alcohol began to take a toll. What once felt like passion began to feel like pressure. In 2016, after over a decade together and just 2 years of marriage, Angelina filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. The announcement sent shockwaves across the world. The couple who once seemed invincible had finally broken, but what came next was even more heartbreaking. Public accusations, custody battles, and deeply personal details spilled into the press. Brad, once seen as the golden boy of Hollywood, found himself under a harsh spotlight. His relationship with his children fractured. His reputation, once spotless, took a serious hit. And through it all, one thing became painfully clear. The love that had once set the world on fire had burned itself out. In the years that followed, Brad began a long journey of self-reflection and recovery. He spoke candidly about getting sober, going to therapy, and facing his own mistakes. "I had to take a long, hard look at myself," he said. "I had to learn how to be the man I should have been years ago." For Angelina, the breakup was equally painful. She focused on her children and her humanitarian work, keeping her distance from the chaos of Hollywood. In interviews, she rarely mentioned Brad, but the sadness in her voice was unmistakable. For Brad, the years after the divorce were quiet ones. He stepped back from the spotlight, worked on films that spoke to his soul, and tried to rebuild trust with his kids. Friends say that during that time, he also reflected on every relationship he'd ever had. What he'd learned, what he'd lost, and who had truly loved him for who he was, not what he represented. And when he finally spoke about his true love, it wasn't with bitterness or regret. It was with a kind of gentle truth that only comes after years of pain, growth and understanding. Because sometimes, the greatest lessons in love don't come from passion or perfection. They come from the heartbreak that forces you to see what really matters. After the fiery end of his marriage to Angelina Jolie, Brad Pitt disappeared from the Hollywood spotlight. For the first time in decades, there were no premieres, no red carpets, no smiling interviews. Instead, he turned inward, facing a battle that fame, money, and charm could no longer help him win. In private, Brad was struggling. Years of emotional strain, public scrutiny, and personal mistakes had caught up with him. "I was drinking too much," he later admitted. "I didn't want to live like that anymore." His confession marked the beginning of one of the most profound transformations in his life, a journey of redemption and rediscovery. Brad entered therapy, quit drinking, and began rebuilding his life piece by piece. Friends described him as quiet, reflective, and humble. He started attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, where he learned to let go of his ego and simply be human again. "You realize," he said, "that all the things you thought mattered, they really don't. What matters are the people you love and the peace you find inside yourself." During this period of self-healing, Brad also began repairing broken relationships, and especially with his children. The custody battles had left deep scars, and rebuilding that trust took time. But those close to him said they saw a man genuinely trying to change. He became softer, more grounded, more grateful. And with that newfound humility came reflection, especially on the women who had shaped his life. For years, he had avoided the subject of Jennifer Aniston, choosing not to reopen old wounds. But time had given him perspective. He started to see that what he once thought was ordinary love had actually been something extraordinary, something pure, stable, and real. In 2020, the world watched as Brad and Jennifer reunited publicly at the SAG Awards. Their brief exchange, a smile, a laugh, a simple touch, was enough to send social media into a frenzy. For fans, it was as if the clock had turned back 20 years. But for Brad, it wasn't nostalgia. It was clarity. "She's an incredible person," he said quietly when asked later. There was a lot of love there. And there still is. Those words revealed more than he perhaps intended. Insiders close to Brad said that privately, he often spoke of Jennifer as the one who got away. Not because of what happened between them, but because of what he lost within himself during that time. "She represented peace," one friend said. "She was home to him, and he didn't realize it until much later." Brad's awakening wasn't just about love lost. It was about learning to value what truly matters. He began living simply, spending more time at his art studio in Los Angeles, creating sculptures and music instead of chasing fame. "It's the quiet things now," he said. "A cup of coffee, a conversation, a sunset. That's the real stuff." He also started speaking about forgiveness, not just for others, but for himself. "You can't move forward if you're carrying guilt," he said. "You've got to let go and be thankful for the love you had, even if it didn't last forever." By the time he won his Oscar for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood in 2020, Brad wasn't the same man he'd been in his youth. Standing on stage, holding the golden statue, his smile was humble, almost wistful. It wasn't the victory that mattered anymore. It was the journey that got him there, and behind that smile, there was one truth he could no longer deny. Through all the fame, the chaos, the heartbreak, there had been one woman who truly saw him, the woman he'd let go too soon. The world had speculated for years, but now Brad's own words confirmed what many had long believed. Jennifer Aniston wasn't just his first great love. She was his true one. And as we move into the final part of this story, we'll see how Brad's admission wasn't just about the past. It was about peace, closure, and the kind of love that never truly fades. Years had passed since Brad Pitt's world unraveled, the divorces, the scandals, the endless headlines. But time, as it often does, softened the edges of heartbreak. And in that quiet stillness, Brad found something he'd been missing for decades: clarity. In 2024, during a candid interview for a documentary about fame, family, and redemption, Brad was asked a simple question: who was the love of your life? There was a long pause. He smiled, that same charming, boyish smile the world had fallen in love with. But behind it was a man who had lived, lost, and learned. Then, almost in a whisper, he said the words no one expected to hear. It was Jen. It always was. Those 5 words broke the internet. Fans who had followed the story since the early 2000s couldn't believe what they were hearing. After years of speculation, Brad Pitt had finally confessed, not to rekindle old flames, but to acknowledge the truth that fame had buried. He went on to explain, "When you're young and ambitious, you chase the next big thing. I thought happiness was out there, in the spotlight, in success, in the thrill of something new. But real love, the kind that grounds you, it was right there, and I didn't see it." For Jennifer Aniston, that chapter of her life had long been closed, but friends say she received Brad's words with quiet grace. "There's no anger anymore," one close source said. "She wishes him peace. She's proud of the man he's become." Their story wasn't about rekindling romance. It was about forgiveness and acceptance. They had both moved on, yet the connection between them remained something timeless, something that fame and heartbreak could never erase. Brad often spoke about how Hollywood magnifies everything: love, mistakes, pride, and pain. "You lose yourself trying to be perfect," he said. "But love isn't perfect. It's about seeing someone's flaws and loving them anyway. Jen taught me that." After his confession, Brad began to appear lighter, freer. He continued his passion projects, building art installations and producing meaningful films rather than chasing blockbusters. Those who knew him best said he seemed at peace for the first time in years. It wasn't just about Jennifer. It was about finally understanding what love really meant. "You don't always get a second chance," he said. "Sometimes, love's greatest gift is showing you who you are, even if you have to lose it to realize it." Fans couldn't help but notice how, despite the passing of time, Brad and Jennifer's lives seemed to mirror each other's in subtle ways. Quiet dinners with mutual friends, shared charity causes, even being spotted at the same events. Nothing romantic, but always respectful, always warm. Hollywood rarely gives stories like theirs a gentle ending. But this one, it wasn't about grand gestures or second marriages. It was about 2 people who found peace after chaos, who forgave, who grew, who looked back with gratitude rather than regret. When asked in a later interview what he would tell his younger self, Brad said, "Slow down. Don't run from the good just because it feels easy. The easy kind of love, the one that feels like home. That's the one you hold on to." Those words resonated deeply with fans who had watched him rise, fall, and rise again. Because behind the Hollywood star, the red carpets and the golden statues, there was always a man searching for something we all want: real, lasting love. And now, at last, Brad Pitt had found peace with his truth. He had traveled through fame, heartbreak, and self-discovery, only to realize that his greatest role wasn't in front of a camera. It was in learning how to love and how to let go. As one journalist wrote after the interview aired, "In a world obsessed with power couples and happy endings, Brad Pitt gave us something rarer: honesty, the kind that reminds us that true love doesn't always end in marriage. Sometimes it ends in understanding." And so, when Brad finally said the words, it was Jen. It always was. The world didn't just hear a confession, they heard closure, they heard peace, and for Brad Pitt, that was enough.